so sunny here. Hi, everybody. I'm Leah Swanberg, and I'm hosting today's webinar with Dr. Liebrack and Cindy Wasser. Dr. Liebrack is the medical director at Create Fertility Center, and Cindy Wasser is the boss in charge at Hope Springs Fertility Law and an amazing fertility lawyer who's going to go through the process with you of, I hope, from considering surrogacy and egg donation as a way to build your family to leaving Canada or leaving the city or province that your surrogate is in with your baby. So Cindy, if I can start with you, I would love for you to walk people through whether they are in Canada or outside of Canada. So sort of the two streams of clients that we seem to see and those that are on our webinar today. What do they need to do to get started and go through the process?
Sure. So essentially, there's not a huge difference between whether you're a domestic Canadian client or a foreigner, other than needing, number one, if you're a foreigner, for me to have access to your lawyer locally. So we want you to have legal advice locally to find out what happens when you bring that baby home. And I want your lawyer to be able to instruct me if there are any particular words or phrases that we're going to want to put in a court order or in a contract. So it's good to get that advice at the beginning, not just when the baby comes. Other than that, really, the process would work similarly. So I'll just bring out distinctions as I go through it. So the first step is, I believe, getting legal advice, of course, because I'm a lawyer, but it's also because lawyers are very independent. In Canada, we don't own agencies or clinics. So we can give clear legal advice for the intended parents about their best interests without having any potential conflict, as we see in some other countries where they do have a financial interest in the companies. And one thing we do differently at Hope Springs is we also look at the contracts that you're getting from agencies and clinics to give you the time to go through it. Because in my experience, even as an intended parent who went through this, when I was bombarded with all the legal work, I didn't have time to really look at it. I just signed everything and figured it was good. And I know when I go through it with my clients, there are a lot of things that they actually didn't understand. They're not objecting to it, but they want to understand it. We'll say to them.
Can I just ask you, if people are considering an egg donor and a surrogate, can one lawyer represent the intended parents in both cases? And what legal considerations are there, whether people are inside or outside of Canada as well?
Again, choosing a donor has no particular interest. Some countries have rules about what information the future child will have access to. And particularly in Europe, a lot of the countries signing on to the Hague Convention will say we're going to have knowledge of the donor's contact information, identity for when the child turns 16 or 18, depending on the country. But they're not requiring the intended parents to have a known donation as long as that information will be accessible in the future. So if the agency has it, or if a lawyer has it, or the clinic has it, it shouldn't be a problem. I'm now starting to get declaration inquiries from lawyers in some countries where they want that access, and they're asking us to put information about the donor in the documents that they're going to submit to their own governments now. So as long as we have it, it's safe. What we don't want is a client in a foreign country where they need that, doing an anonymous donation and not being able to get anything from you in the future. So if there's a possibility that an agency may not exist in 16 years, or a clinic may get rid of the files, we need to have it somewhere. So we'll want to get it now and give it safely. But I'm finding it now, and I'm sure you are too, most donors are very content to have some sort of known donation where that information is shared. But I don't see a big difference. And certainly with domestic clients, the donor in Canada for obtaining a declaration is irrelevant to that process. Our judges don't even want that information in our court orders. So we'll look at the contracts, we look at donor profiles, surrogacy profiles, and we guide our clients to make the right choices. I always do the puzzle analogy because I'm a great puzzle person. I've done, a 3,000 piece puzzle with 3 colors 1,000 times, whereas my clients are doing it for the first time. It's overwhelming. So together we start flipping the pieces and separating to find those 4 sides. The flat sides are easy. Now we have to try to make puzzle piles of colors, and that's where it becomes challenging. But I've done it, so I can help them do it quickly. And at this stage, they could do it without my help if they had the time. But most people want that. So we suggest being retained early to guide them through this. I'll also find, because it's human nature, that somebody's busy at a clinic or an agency. I drop a file, you drop a file, Dr. Liebrack's office can drop a file. Everyone drops a file in every business. But working as a team, we have each other's back to say, hey, your client's asking this. And you may come to me and say, your clients are saying what's going on. And, we can help each other that way as a team, which benefits the client. So I like to be part of the team right away.
And Cindy, where are you located? And is it important that you're located where the intended parent surrogate is located, or where they are located if they're Canadian? Do you need to be in the same place?
No, so I'm based in Toronto. My whole team works remotely. I even have a virtual assistant in the Philippines. I have most of my staff in Ontario, but I'm working on expanding staff in Alberta and one who will be in Greece, as a matter of fact, but is Canadian. So with remote access, we can be anywhere. The Canadian law does not require us to work within the province with respect to the contract. You have to be in Canada, lawyers have to be called to the bar in their provinces to do legal work there. But the contract is a Canadian contract. So if the surrogate's in another province, she has a lawyer there, that's fine. Or I'm doing it anywhere and the clients are foreign, they're doing a surrogacy contract, which is federal. So we don't have a problem with that. When it comes time to file the paperwork for the declaration, it's done in the province and there should be a lawyer in that province. So our office will do it in Ontario. And as we expand to different provinces, we'll be doing it in those provinces. But we currently work with colleagues in those provinces. So we're not abandoning our clients ever.
Okay, so people have met with you, they've decided to move forward. You're helping them with the other pieces. Now they've selected a surrogate, or they've selected an egg donor. Like who do you typically represent with intended parents first? Is it their egg donor file, their surrogacy file, or sort of all at the same time?
Well, usually they're going to make the embryos first. So we're separating it and starting with the egg donor file. Very fortunately, occasionally they have a surrogate at the same time they found right away. So we'll just work on them together. Most surrogates, and you probably speak better to this than I do, they don't want to proceed until they know that there are embryos and that a couple is almost ready to go to make embryos at least. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's a family member, so they are doing it together. The only time I do it a bit differently is if the client tells me that for them, it's a one and done deal with this particular surrogate, their sister, their cousin. And if she can't be their surrogate, they're not doing it. In that case, I would say to them, make sure she gets her screening done first. Don't worry about the embryos, because if you're serious, you're not proceeding, why bother making embryos? So that's the most unusual situation. But it's embryos first, egg donor, and then surrogacy contract.
Excellent. So they've gotten the contracts, they've gone to the clinic, which we're going to talk about next. They've gotten pregnant. Do they need legal advice throughout the pregnancy for any reason?
Sometimes something comes up more related to a reimbursement. In our situation, I find, because my clients are well advised about making sure their surrogate's needs are taken care of and everything's legal, they might come to me and say, can we give her this? Can we give her that? And it can't be compensation or a gift if they're in Canada, because our Canadians cannot do that. So if it's related to the surrogacy, it's always going to be legal. So we'll just help out with that. Sometimes the agency comes to me and says, we're not sure if we can reimburse a particular request that's unusual. And so I will talk to the agency. The other lawyer who acted for whoever, the surrogate or the intended parents, will get involved and we'll brainstorm it and say, here's what we think. It's unusual that anything else would come up. If there's a complication in the health of the pregnancy, then they're really going to the clinic, or at that, if they're at with the OB at that point, it's not really a legal issue.
So that's a good point. You said the other person's lawyer. So the egg donor needs her own lawyer, the surrogate needs their own lawyer.
Yeah.
And why is that? If this is
You-
just like there's no one's fighting. This is like we're just wanting
yeah.
to have a kid. Like, why do we need all these lawyers involved?
Thank you for raising that, because that comes up a lot. People don't understand. It's not an adversarial process. You're not buying a company to tear it apart. You're not trying to get a better deal on a house. You're not going to be suing because you didn't get the windows you ordered. So it is, and especially when it's a family member or a friend, people think we don't need a lawyer. We love each other. And that's when you probably need a lawyer most, because you don't want to go through the pregnancy looking at the expenses and saying, did you really need that winter coat? You know, we want to get through all of this ugly stuff, the yucky stuff, as we call it legally, in advance of the pregnancy, because I really want to see the intended parents and the surrogate talking about how she couldn't sleep for the last 3 nights because their baby's been kicking ferociously, and we want them to be going, yes, but not really showing her that and going, oh, we're so sorry. Or how she's had her head in the toilet for 2 days, because that's all a good sign. We want them to talk about the baby during the pregnancy, and of course saying, what do you need? We're here seeing a bad winter's coming. Do you have a good coat? That's lovely. So we want to take care of the money. We want to make sure she and her family have everything. And I can't do that if I'm acting for intended parents. I don't think the surrogate's going to have the confidence to tell me privately what her concerns are. So we want her to have independent legal advice. And in many provinces, in order to register the birth, that's actually a legal requirement. What we can do in some provinces where it's not a legal requirement for the actual registration, if she's done it before, she may waive independent legal advice, and we put it in an affidavit and the judge will agree to it. But in Ontario, for example, if you're doing an administrative registration, which we'll talk about, it's a requirement for each and every pregnancy, even if you're having your 4th baby with the same surrogate. We need another contract. She needs independent legal advice. The donor is different. There's absolutely no legal requirement for contracts with donors or independent legal advice. It's a bizarre anomaly in our law. Ethically, it's the safest thing to do. A donor should have legal advice, knowing what she's doing. And, I for years, the clinics took a personal policy that said if it's a known donor, we want to see that there's been a contract, but it's not a legal requirement. And now I'm seeing more and more clinics and agencies are saying, oh no, this is our policy. There's going to be legal advice. And I'm glad to see that, because I have children through a donor. I think the contract is a very important thing, and I'm very close to my donor.
So when you talk about, you mentioned the yuck items, the tricky items, the things that really are legal requirements to have the conversation about. I know, whether it's termination, whether it's, bed rest or lost wages, or, some of the pieces that can become contentious. Can you talk about how that's navigated, really ensuring that the surrogate is cared for and that the intended parents aren't breaking the law in Canada?
Yeah, so it's very important at Hope Springs that the surrogate and her family have all their needs met. And we can only meet them if the surrogate can tell us what they are. So when she's working with an agency, the agency has a special training and skill set to get that from her in advance. That's part of the intake. And they'll give us that information in a document. And if we're acting for the surrogate, we will sit down with her with that and go through it again and make sure there's nothing missing. Because she may have told you, for example, in intake, my kids are in school, I don't really need any childcare, except maybe on the weekends. And then I say to her, how are you getting them to school when you're in bed? Oh, who's picking them up? Who's taking this one to hockey and ballet? And, they can pack their own lunches. They're 10 and 12. Okay, but who's buying the food? Oh. So those are the things that we want to make clear. And in most cases, the agencies have done that, but we'll go through it. We have surrogates who have benefit policies at their employment that are so complicated. I have trouble understanding how much they're getting. So we work with them in their HR department to say, okay, you have to go through your sick days. Then I have to explain this to the other lawyer so they can explain it to a foreign intended parent who doesn't understand these benefits in the first place, because we want them to agree. The little things come up that aren't so legal, like a surrogate saying, I want to buy a treadmill. And then everyone's thinking, oh my God, a $3,000 Peloton. But then I say, why? And she says, because I'm an hour and a half drive to a gym. So it would take 4 hours of my day to work out for an hour, and I have kids, and I'm a bit overweight and I'm ashamed to go, so I'm not going to go. And I found one used online for $750. Suddenly the perspective is, oh, that's fantastic. And when I tell that to the other lawyer and they explain to their intended parent client, the client comes back and says she should buy a new one. $2,000 seems reasonable to us. It's suddenly a different perspective that lawyers do. And together, she may have been afraid to say that to the intended parents, uncomfortable because they feel these people have spent so much money, they've suffered so much to get here. I don't want to ask them for this treadmill. So it's our job to get that from her in a comfortable way. I have a special needs child, a surrogate will say to me. I feel so bad, but if I can't take care of this child, the babysitter I have for them is, $500 a day. So I have to say to the intended parents, that's what it's going to be. And, the lawyer has to be able to tell their client that that's what it is. And they're going to love her. They're going to do it. But if the intended parent simply can't afford those possible things, then it's not the surrogate for them. They have to be able to afford it. So if I act for the intended parents, I tell them anything might be, can you or can you not afford bed rest? In Canada, we have social services. So if a surrogate has a baby or goes on bed rest during the pregnancy, she may qualify for what we call employment insurance, which is a benefit taxpayers pay and employed people pay into, or their employers do, which gives her roughly up to 55% of her weekly income up to a cap. So most surrogates will get the 55%, but there's 1 week where they get nothing because people are expected to contribute to their time off. So the intended parents have to understand that they have to pay that full week if there's bed rest or post-birth recovery, and then the 45% top off unless her employer does that. So a teacher, for example, might have 95% top off at work, and my clients would only pay 5% of her lost income if. So if she says, I'm going to want 8 months after the baby off work, rather than them going, oh my God, I'm going to explain to them, you're paying $10 a day. That's really a different perspective again, isn't it?
There's so many considerations there and so many things to tease out. Thank you for going through many of them. Now, the surrogate's pregnant, we're preparing for the birth. At what point do intended parents sort of reconnect with you or another lawyer in the province that the surrogate's delivering in? And what does that entail in terms of getting started again to then be able to get home, or whether that's across the globe or across the street? What does that look like for people?
So with Hope Springs, it's slightly different. We don't say goodbye. We want to hear as the pregnancy is developing because we are all very passionate about it. But technically, the time for retainer for the declaration, we want to start at around 25 weeks gestation. If it's a court order, 20 weeks, because we have a lot of work to prepare. If they can do the administrative registration here in Ontario, or if they're in British Columbia, it's not a lot of work. So I'm happy to wait for 30 weeks, but babies come early, so we want to be ready. And if we're drafting affidavits for the court and applications, we want to give it to our clients to review first, and then we want to give it to the surrogate to review. We need a letter from the clinic to include to that. So we want all the time to do that. In addition, the hospital will see the surrogate and the intended parents for meeting at around 25 weeks. The surrogate's going to have a tour with and a meeting with this hospital's social worker. The parents can attend. If they're foreigners, they might be part of the meeting on Zoom. But they often want a letter from us saying, just in their file, it's a surrogacy. She's agreed. It's their baby. Everyone knows that she makes decisions until the baby's born, and then please let them make the decisions and give them the baby. And now that it's so common, more and more hospitals are telling us we don't need it, although they're not unhappy having it in the file. So those things take time. So we don't want to rush it. And if a client is having trouble, getting the 5,000 or 6,000 to go together to retain us at that point, because there's so many other expenses, we'll at least say start with something so we can start drafting and, pay us the rest as time goes on. But we don't abandon them. If the baby is being delivered in another province where I'm not going to do the declaration, I'm introducing them to my colleague in that province. And I'm still staying close to them. These are our people, our family at Hope Springs. So we demand photos at birth. We want to see many, many photos. And if I'm doing the declaration, the policy is no photos, no work. So we're very close to our clients. We stay in touch. Many of them don't get assistance in the other province with getting their passports. So we'll do it for them. We'll be their guarantor because we've known them for 2 years. So, the passport process is a bit tricky for foreigners. Most of them come here not believing how wonderful the law is and how good it is and open, because they're living in a culture of fear and secrecy, not just for having a baby, but for being who they are, given sometimes their sexual orientation. So it's hard for them to believe that when they come to Canada, everybody's congratulating them, including customs. So we want to educate them when they're coming for the baby to say, we are coming to have a baby through surrogacy. I had a client who came to Toronto in February and said they were on vacation, and customs pulled them aside and said, nobody goes to Toronto in February for a vacation, buddy. So it's best to tell the truth. And then the customs people are thrilled, and generally they have a gay nephew or son and they want to know all about it. That's what happens. Same at the hospital. And then the passport requirements for the Canadian citizen that the baby are that you need a guarantor, which is somebody who can say that they've known you for 2 years, who holds a Canadian passport, and they're swearing this on the form. So if they don't know anyone for 2 years, if they've been fortunate enough to be matched and have a baby that quickly, they may find themselves in a quagmire. They don't know you, they don't know me, they don't know anyone at the clinic, the surrogate can't do it. So Canada has a separate form for that called a statutory declaration in lieu of a guarantor. The lawyer signs that, but then we also have to have the pictures to sign. So if they're not near me, everything needs to be couriered. And then we need 2 names of references who have to be local, because for some reason, Passport Canada claims they can't make long distance calls. So, and that is immigration and citizenship, but that's what it is. So we want to help them with that, and we want them to go to the passport office and not feel scared. We've had a couple instances where the websites were hacked and the passports were down, Canada was down, and our foreign clients thought they were going to be arrested in the passport office. And instead, the passport office went to a drugstore to print the passport and told them to just stay put. There was no arresting. So we want foreigners to know this is super cool. They think it's wonderful. It's the hardest thing is that you need to get 2 pictures of the baby with its eyes wide open during the day. Good luck.
True. We hear that time and time again, that seems to be the most difficult part.
It is. They cry.
Yeah. So Cindy, it's all over. The world is watching the US and this, reproductive freedoms going away, that IVF being on the chopping block in many states, inability to access women's health care. I geek out on that like crazy right now, and I've been podcasting and blogging, and I've got 5 daughters, so it matters to me, and I'm curious what you think with the consideration of a conservative government, if in Canada clients who are watching this will ever have to worry about what's going on in the US, and why Canada may be the place to come for surrogacy based on what is going on in the US from a legal perspective.
Yeah, it's different because we have a constitutional right, our Supreme Court said that the right to liberty is control of one's body, and so the argument about abortion rights in Canada went to the Supreme Court of Canada years ago in Morgenthaler, and our court said it's an actual Charter of Rights issue, and so our Constitution is different than the U.S. It can't be amended that easily, and it can't be struck down that easily, so it's pretty safe. There's some rumors from the up-and-coming Conservative government that they may allow members of Parliament to bring forward something, but there just isn't that political will of the Christian far right here to stop it. And I think that's one of the things that the leader of the government is worried about in letting this go forward. It won't happen, or the leader of the Conservative party. So I don't see it as becoming a legal issue. The other thing is we don't see embryos as little people, and we don't see Dr. Liebrecht as running a cryo nursery. He doesn't have insurance for that. And so, so embryos are property. They don't, and the fetus has no rights across the country as a constitutional issue as well. We're very cautious. In fact, during COVID, when the Canadian government was finding a way to let foreigners into the country as parents, because no one other than a parent could come in, they had to find a way to call them parents even though the baby wasn't born, without opening Pandora's box to saying the fetus is a child. And so the way they worded the new legislation, and remarkably in 9 days, was if you're having a baby via surrogacy in Canada, you will be deemed a parent solely for the purposes of entering this country before the birth. So it was very limited, giving foreigners better rights than you and I as potential parents, but we're good with that. So those are the circumstances. And it was very scary because nobody had ever thought about a parent when they made, immigration rules of who could come in, that a parent would be somebody having a baby throughout someone else's body. So it had to get updated, but that's how our government saw it. We are also a very tolerant society, and that's just been years of culture. The current prime minister's father brought in the omnibus bill in 1968 that said homosexuality shouldn't be a crime. And that same legislation said therapeutic abortion should be allowed and birth control should be allowed for women in 1968. And it became law in 69. And therapeutic abortion was a committee at a hospital that said, okay, you're suffering. And then we even got rid of that and just said, okay, you can have one. We don't impose them on people, and nobody sees it as a party. But we certainly would never subject a 12-year-old who's been raped by her father to have a baby.
Yeah,
that wouldn't happen in this country.
We are extremely lucky here, and I'm so grateful to be in Canada. And I'm starting to ask everyone this question because I'm getting more and more curious about the U.S. and the government and sort of what's going on there and how it's impacting us here in terms of more and more U.S. clients coming again because of the fears around those pieces.
The big difference is their constitution. Each state has jurisdiction to make rules surrounding the abortion issue, and it wasn't ingrained in a federal constitution the way ours is, so we're safer.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, it's reproductive health, it's women's health care, and access is so important. I'm going to switch gears to Dr. Liebrecht. I would love for you to walk us through how people who are thinking about egg donation and surrogacy, what they need to do before they talk to you, what they need to talk to you about in terms of providing you their health details, and then how your clinic supports them up until 12 weeks pregnant.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This is an amazing discussion, and Cindy outlined the legal aspects of this so well. It was really lovely to hear her talk. And I think, as I agree with all of you, that Canada is an amazing place to do this because we have such great laws and and our egg donors and surrogates do this through altruism. They do it from the goodness of their heart. They want to help somebody have a baby and carry a baby for them. So I think I feel so fortunate to be here. I actually trained in the U.S. in UCSF in San Francisco, and I came back to Canada because I felt this was the best place to be for medical care. So I'm really, really proud to be here. And our clinic is in Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada. It's easy to access by flights from pretty well everywhere in the world. And so it's nice that people come internationally, can come here very easily. Our egg donors who kind of want to be in a large city when they come here for a week or two, if they're far away, they like to be in a place where they can really enjoy themselves during that time they're here. And our surrogates, it's easy to access. So I think that really makes us a premier place to be in Canada. So I'm really proud of that. And we are the largest clinic in Canada in terms of IVF cycles, and we're also by far the largest third-party program in Canada, and one of the largest in the world because we really emphasize this hugely in our program. We have more than 20 nurses that just do this alone, and our administrative people. So, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel so proud of the work that we've done in this area. So, without further discussion about that, actually, all of our doctors here are professors at the University of Toronto, and so we are academic, and we hold our clinic to be at a high level that's accredited. We get inspected regularly and want to have the best quality care and be on the cutting edge because of all the research we do. So let's talk about the third-party program and how that works. So anyone that wants to come here to have a baby through help with us from the medical aspects of this, they may need a surrogate, they may need an egg donor, they may have their own embryos that they're going to ship here, and we're going to help them with surrogacy and so on. So there's many different ways that people access care through what we call third party, which is egg donation and or surrogacy, and we can help all of them. And the beauty of Canada is that we can help people of any background, single women, single men, same-sex female, same-sex male, transgender, anything that you can imagine, we can help them here in Canada. There's absolutely no restriction on that, and we are so proud to be able to offer those services to every one of them. So when somebody comes to our clinic, we will then first start off with a medical sort of consultation with a doctor so that we can tell you all about what we do. And that starts off by taking a medical history from the people that are coming to us to provide either to basically have a baby, either through their own gametes or through or egg or sperm, or through donated eggs or sperm and a surrogate or not. So we would then take a full medical history to learn more about them and why they need the service to make sure it is appropriate for them. And for same-sex males, for example, we would look at their medical background and go through entire medical history to learn more about them and any aspects that could affect their sperm and what we can do to improve that if there was a problem. And generally speaking, that you can do most of the testing even if you're far away from Toronto in Canada or internationally. Initially, we get blood work, we get urine testing, we get genetic testing to make sure that the person providing the sperm or egg is going to have not be carrying a genetic disease that could be passed on to the child. Now, we do have an amazing genetics program here, so we can test for any kind of genetic condition beforehand. But if we're looking at somebody, selecting a donor, for example, we want to make sure that the two people don't have the same mutation, because pretty well all of us have mutations in our genes. You test enough things, and we now test over 500 different genes. So we want to make sure that you and the donor, for example, don't have the same mutation, because getting together could potentially cause the child to have a very severe disease, and we want to avoid that. We also do a full discussion on all the aspects of the process, and that would involve talking about what you have to do in your country in terms of getting tested. And then we would have you come here, generally in most cases, to then provide sperm or eggs, doing an IVF cycle if you are, say, a heterosexual couple, to come here and make embryos here. And also you can make embryos in your own country and then ship them here. And we can get embryos from pretty well any country in the world that can be shipped to Canada, and we can use those for helping you have a child. And also, when you're going to be providing sperm for the process, that can be done in two ways. The most common is that you fly to Toronto and you freeze your sperm. But during COVID, we had to be very innovative, and we developed a kit that we can ship to you. You can freeze your own sperm at home, and using a video that tells you how to freeze the sperm, not how to make the sperm, and then also how to then ship that back with blood taken from you to Canada. And we can actually do this all remotely. And for many people, taking off the time to come here may be difficult. So that's also an advantage to use the kit. And we just recently actually presented our data on the kit versus coming here, and really there was no difference in outcomes. So we're very proud of that development. But in general, nowadays, people do travel here and come to Canada and come to visit our clinic and are able to provide sperm. And we also blood work is done at the same time. And counseling, we also provide counseling either remotely or can sometimes be done here as well. And then we also will do you need to have a physical exam. Sometimes that can be done in your own country, but we can also provide that potentially here if it's difficult to organize in your own country. So we do a full assessment of all of that. And then we talk also about egg donation. So we want to, if you're needing an egg donor, we want to talk about how do you select a donor? What are the important things about an egg donor that you want to know in order to be able to do that? And you're going to get a huge amount of information about the egg donor that is going to give you a really huge amount of data that you'll be able to use to understand about that donor. For example, you're going to get a full medical history on her. You're going to get a family and ethnic background. This is really something that the agencies collect this information in order to give to you. You will also get photos of her. You'll get a description of her physical features, personality, education, work, hobbies, talents, you name it. You're going to know so much about them. I always say you're going to know more about them than you know about your partner when you got together. So it's a huge amount of information. And we look for certain things in a donor that we may not recommend them to be selected as a donor. For example, any kind of genetic condition that runs in their family. And again, back to that genetic testing, we're going to test her to make sure you are compatible with this particular donor. We look for things like, genetic related mental illness. Is there any thing that might increase the risk of that in a child that you may be having? We look at substance abuse issues in the family. We do toxicology testing on all donors to make sure she's not smoking cigarettes, which could affect her eggs, or taking drugs that might affect the eggs, or any kind of medications that could also affect the eggs. So we want to make sure that we're going to be able to, have a chance of having the healthiest possible baby for you. We also do a test called the anti-Müllerian hormone, which is a special. I'm sorry, I just have to turn this off here. Sorry about that. So we also do a test called the anti-Müllerian hormone on the donor to make sure that she has a good ovarian reserve, which is really critical for selecting a donor that's going to give you the best results for your process. And if you're a same-sex male couple and you want to, which is very common to have a child from the sperm of each of you together with the eggs from a donor, so have the sort of a genetic link between the two children, then we want to have a larger number of eggs because we want to make sure we have embryos for each of you. The average donor will have somewhere between 16 and 30 eggs on average. And if you split that 50-50, then you're going to have somewhere between 8 and 15 eggs on average. But We want to select for same-sex male couples donors that have towards the higher end of that range in order to get enough embryos for each of you. And it's possible your sperm may not be equal in its ability to produce embryos, and therefore you might not have an equal number of embryos for each of you. So the more eggs we have, the more chance we're going to be able to help you have a child for each of you. We also do infectious disease testing on all the donors, including HIV. One thing you can be reassured is that HIV is not transmitted through eggs, it's transmitted through blood. So there's never been a case in the world of transmission of HIV through an egg donor to a surrogate or baby. So it's very, very safe, and we want to make sure that everything is safe for your baby. We also do the psychosocial screening. So we have counselors here that will talk to the donor and speak to them, and we want to make sure we feel comfortable with this person to be a donor for, and look at all the psychosocial aspects of the donor.
And so once people have selected the egg donor, you have their sperm, they go through the IVF process, then as they're looking for a surrogate, how do you meet with the surrogate, screen the surrogate, know that the surrogate is a good candidate, and then move forward with a hopeful pregnancy?
Great question. So we've already created our embryos. We've genetically tested them for chromosome abnormalities ahead of time, and that's about 30% of them will be abnormal. So we want to only select, if possible, just the normal tested embryos. And when we look at surrogates, then we do a full medical screening, and all surrogates, in most cases, must already have children. We've had the odd case where they haven't, where they've gone through extensive counseling and we've been able to do that. But in most cases, they've already had children and a safe pregnancies, and they also are healthy in general to be able to do this, because they're doing this to help you have a baby, not to put their own life at risk. And also we want to have a healthy baby at the end. We also test their partner if they have a partner. Some are single, to make sure they don't have anything that could harm the pregnancy during the time before the birth. And then we also do urine toxicology tests on them, just like our donors, to make sure they're not smoking cigarettes, taking drugs, or any medication that could harm the baby during the pregnancy. We also do psychosocial screening on them to make sure we feel comfortable with them for donor. But you have to screen them too. You have to feel like, this person really seems so nice. I really feel comfortable with them. I feel I can, really work with them easily, and I feel I can trust them to look after our baby and her body for 9 months during a pregnancy, and that she'll do everything possible to help us have a healthy child at the end. And it also works both ways in Canada, because there's altruistic surrogacy. They also choose you too, and they want to feel like you're so nice, and I would really love to help this person have a beautiful, healthy baby at the end. So it has to be mutual, that you want to work together. And I think Leah could speak more to that, but that's really part of the matching process with agencies.
So if you're in Toronto and intended parents are looking at a profile of a surrogate in Vancouver, can you still take care of the surrogate? Can you still do the embryo transfer because you've created these, genetically amazing embryos? Can they still travel to you? And then how do you care for them for the first sort of trimester, as if you would if she were just down the street?
Great, Chad. Great question. So if they're local, within a few hours of Toronto, of course, we can look after them here at our clinic. If they're in BC or Newfoundland or wherever they are, obviously it's more difficult for us to do that in a physical way, but we can also do that remotely. So for the first trimester of their pregnancy, we follow them very closely and make sure that they're doing all the things necessary to get them off to a really good start. And then at one point, either a midwife or obstetrician would then, or family doctor, would look after their pregnancy to make sure they have a healthy birth at the end. So we can have people coming here from anywhere in Canada, even places around the world. A surrogate can come from the US, Mexico, all kinds of places that are outside of Canada as well.
That's fantastic. And as you sort of close the file at 12 weeks and the surrogate moves on to her care provider, And do you find that many people are coming back and having another child with all these embryos that are stored at your clinic? What would you say to our two dad potential families that are freezing embryos from both? How often is it that they're each having a child from those embryos?
It's very, very often. And what's so amazing is that, just yesterday I did 5 surrogacy transfers, and 2 of them were doing a sibling journey for the same couple. So there's a lot of times if you develop an amazing relationship and the pregnancy goes really well, often a surrogate, you've developed that relationship, would love to help you have a brother or sister for your first child. So it's amazing surrogates in Canada. I'm so always in awe of the people that do this in Canada. For many of them, it's the most important thing they've ever done in their whole life. And their families are so proud of them for doing this. And and I always see them showing pictures of the babies that they've carried, from many other couples, even when they've done multiple surrogacy journeys. So it's amazing. So we really, really love working with the surrogates that come here. And I feel so emotional when I talk about this, because it's just an amazing thing that they do.
It really is. I know over the past 20 years, my first personal journey was 20 years ago, and being in this surrogacy world for 20 years, it's changed so much, yet it is still the same in that the most important relationship that anyone will have is with their surrogate or the intended parents or the donor, and how finding people like yourselves to help insulate that relationship by taking care of every medical question, every legal question, all of those pieces, so they can just tuck in with the relationship. It really is just so amazing. I will give now just a short process of looking for an egg donor and a gestational carrier in Canada. And as I do that, it will be based on, sort of 20 years in this space. And I'll be speaking on behalf of Egg Helpers, Canada's largest egg donor program, and Canadian Fertility Consulting, Canada's largest surrogacy agency. And I will say, definitely choose your donor first. We really want to make sure that you have embryos going into your surrogacy. Um, and as you're selecting your donor, to really think about, whether or not you want to have a known or an anonymous donor. I spent a lot of years, on a soapbox about known donors until meeting an intended mother who shared with me, some cultural beliefs that I hadn't contemplated. And so now I say to people, do the donation that's right for you, whether it's a donor or an intended parent. And so I would encourage you um, to really look at each profile very carefully. And if she's willing to be known, she may be willing to be anonymous. So to ask the questions, you're taking yourself with you throughout this journey. So ask those questions of an agency that you're considering an egg donor through. It's really important. Having a legal contract means you are taking care of your baby. And in doing so, you're taking care of your needs. You're bringing yourself forward to take care of your donor's needs, which, if you're taking care of your donor, as I said, it's taking care of your baby. And if you're taking care of your child's mother, because you will have a child through this, we hope, and you are the mother or you are the father of that child, even in these early days, taking care of your child's parent is the ultimate act of self-care and is so important. So you selected a donor through an agency, you've got legal documentation, you begin the process. You then start putting together your biography for the surrogate that's going to choose you, and you really get clear on a few things, because not showing up in alignment with who you are will be very easy for surrogates to pick out. Your face will show it in the video that you create. And so really being open about the type of relationship that you're up for, getting curious with yourself and your partner around what that relationship is. Many intended parents have come from an extensive background of trauma. And so expecting you to show up with smiles on your face may not be possible. And one thing that we know, and we hear from surrogates all the time, is that hope is really what they want to see. They know that this has been a long road, and just, are you hopeful? Are you excited about this process? Are you ready? Do you have the embryos? Do you have support within your family or with people, so that the surrogate knows you will not be relying on her for emotional support. And we say the same thing to surrogates. We want you to be able to show up for each other and have, your own hype squad behind you, which for surrogates often ends up being the agency or outside programs like Sacred Surrogacy, who really partner with the surrogate to ensure that she is taking care of herself, which in turn is taking care of your baby. And that goes across many platforms and reasons and whys and hows and all of that. But also getting clear on whether or not you would be up for a home birth or midwifery care or obstetrical care or a family doctor. Care in each province in Canada looks very different. Care in Canada versus outside of Canada looks very different. Pregnancy health is managed very differently. Provincially and outside. So really looking at what your values are around pregnancy and around birth, any religious values that would have you counting yourself in or out with a surrogate. Finding the right match, not the quickest match, is really important. And finding that right match is definitely can be hard. And we hold intended parents at CFC really able to decide whether it's the right fit for them or not. And so we get really excited when people tell us, you know what, no thanks, I'm passing. Every time you say no, you're getting closer to the right yes. And so we encourage people to get there in their own time. So finding a surrogate that shares your values, having your team in place, your clinic, your lawyer, and then moving through the process. I know that Dr. Liebrecht will tell you the wait time might be 3 months, and maybe it is, but we really want to give a realistic expectation around that. So we sort of say 6 to 9 months to find a surrogate. And we hope that from that point, pregnancy comes quickly and you're able to move through the process in that way. A great agency will have a great team. So lawyer, clinic. For us at CFC, one thing that we've found really, really important is that intended parents have their own coordinator or support person, and surrogates have their own coordinator or support person. We never want to be mixed up in who we're supporting or how we're supporting them, because we're both standing, you see a 6 and I see a 9 because we're looking at the floor, and it is a 6 and it is a 9. But if you have one person supporting you, how do they tell you it's a 6 and not a 9? So we really want to make sure that intended parents have support, that they have the answers that they need, that they're heard independent of what the surrogate is experiencing, because both realities can be true. And whether that's how great things are going or potentially how difficult things are going. And so showing up for everyone is really, really important. So working on that all the time, super important. And then as well, we, if a surrogate doesn't get pregnant or the match breaks because her personal situation changes, or you as intended parents need to put things on hold for a health issue or other reason, making sure that your agency is willing to find you someone new and to work with you on how to find someone new. So whether that's sharing your story on social media, whether that's sending your profile out through networks and really, really just pushing and advocating for you. It has been the hardest piece for intended parents when they just fall into what we call a jinx, and they're really struggling to be rematched. And so finding an agency that's committed to that is really important. And I would say that, the agency you work with, helping you until you leave the country, not until you have the baby, because it's, those 2 weeks after or 3 weeks after or 4 weeks, depending where your surrogate lives, can feel longer than the whole journey. New parenthood can be very isolating. And so our goal is that you still have psychosocial support through a counselor, that you still have your coordinator checking in. How's it going? How's baby? How are you? How are you managing? Do you want us to help you with finding a night nurse or some care so you can get some sleep, or, whatever that looks like for you. And then as well, having that available to your surrogate as well, to ensure that everyone is getting supported in that most important 4th trimester. I know we are keeping this webinar to an hour, and so we are at that hour. So I wanted to just thank Cindy and Dr. Liebrecht for joining me. We will get this out to everyone who's registered as well. We will have it on our YouTube channel, as I'm sure these guys will as well. So thank you so much, Cindy and Dr. Liebrecht, for joining
Thank
us.
you so much
Pleasure.
for inviting me to be a part of this and share the information.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you.
Making sure everyone has a safe and healthy journey is really what brings us so much joy. And while
Absolutely.
we're on that, I just want to say Dr. Liebrecht clients emailed me to say, first transfer with you July 1st, surrogate's pregnant.